case you're wondering,
Everybody,
these are the banners for Be Nice to Monsignor Day.
So, going off of communism, what's the difference between communism and socialism?
Communism is socialism. I mean, socialism in its very mildest definition is, collectives working together for a common good and sharing their resources, and no one person getting rich off of anything, but the things benefiting the group in general. I mean, in that sense, a monastery is socialist, but it's not the bad kind of socialist, because communism is Marxist socialism, as defined by Karl Marx, which is specifically atheistic and all kinds of other bad things thrown in there. So communism is a kind of socialism, but not all socialism is communism.
So the socialism we hear about in the news and all that is a nice way of putting it as communism.
That's communism. So when they talk about, Bernie Sanders or whatever, he's a commie. Yeah, they're just saying it in a nice way, I guess.
His friend Engels tried to stop him. He said he's going insane, but didn't stop him on time, and they both considered to be the fathers of the communism.
Yeah.
Karl Marx was the father of communism. He was also a Freemason.
Oh, well, yeah. Marx was, Lenin, Stalin, Jewish as well. There were Jewish Freemasons. Trotsky. So now we turn to commandment number 5. Don't worry, if it sounds like we're taking too long to do the commandments, we do 6 and 9 together, so at least we get 2 out of the way at once later on. Now, the 5th commandment, as we well know, is put in English as "Thou shalt not kill." Without this commandment, there would be no security for the life of man, either for his physical life or his spiritual life. Life is man's greatest good, so God wishes to safeguard it against attack. God alone is the author of life. He alone may take life, apart from the circumstances of a just war, the execution of a criminal, and legitimate self-defense. So as I've said before, but just a reminder, what happened? What did I do now? You dropped something over there, so. The sense of it is you shall not murder, you shall not take an innocent life, basically. And so these things, just war, the execution of a criminal, and legitimate self-defense. Now, there are conditions. Practically no modern war we've gotten into has been a just war. They've been political wars for certain economic or political purposes. A just war is when there's an unjust aggressor who's trying to take your life and limb and your property and your country over by force. And then you wage a war to protect what is yours, essentially. Or there's another case where there's another sort of just war where it might not be your country, but an unjust aggressor has taken over another country, and you go in to liberate them in that sense. The problem is, Pius XII defined a just war, and it's good to read about that. You read about it on the internet. Yeah.
It says you shall kill or take innocent life, but what does it say? The guys who escape prison, the 3 guys who escape those,
They're not innocent. Once the guys who escaped the prison, that's not innocent life. These are, innocent life means you've done nothing to deserve being killed. I mean, the guys who escaped from that prison deserve being killed like 1,000,000 times over, from what I understand. And that's the same with capital punishment, is the life of a criminal who's going to be executed it's not innocent. They have proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he has done something which deserves capital punishment, you see. And so they do that. In any case, you should read the conditions for just war that Pius XII gave us quite a while ago, and then really see how many of the wars we get into are just wars. This whole nonsense, about the whole Middle East. What are we gonna? We've really opened up a can of worms there. I was in Costco the other. You just think I live in Costco, right? But so this lady came up to me, and she was an Iraqi Catholic. And, she told me what I already knew when I was talking to her. Bush went in and destroyed Hussein and everything. Saddam Hussein was protecting Iraqi Catholics and was the only one who held everything together there. The terrorism that we are now experiencing was because George Bush brilliantly decided to get rid of Saddam Hussein, who was holding it all together.
Wait, so he was good?
He wasn't the kind you'd invite over for dinner, but he did protect the Christians against the Muslims. His wife was Christian, and he held all the groups at bay. Like there was none of this terrorism under. Yeah, well, George W. came up with this thing about weapons of mass destruction and all that. Well, it was all a ruse. So it's all a ruse because they want to break down all these places so the Antichrist can erect his kingdom.
Isn't that what the Syrian dictator was doing too? He kind of keeps everybody.
Yeah, and that's happening to him now. He was doing the same thing in Syria, which is why we have so many Christians being killed over there now, which you don't hear too much about, but you can hear stuff about that. In the old days, it was the Holy Roman Empire. It was the Habsburgs that did that. The Habsburgs held everything together in the old Holy Roman Empire. And there were Muslims, there was all kinds of people living in the Holy Roman Empire, but the Habsburgs got everybody to live together in relative peace. And, so you see what happens when you start pulling out the kingpins there.
So then just for some clarification on my part, if it's not a just war, then being a soldier, you shouldn't be going to another country and killing people?
Well, you see, but there's the problem that it's not the choice of the individual soldier usually. It's the choice of the person commanding the soldier.
So then you should
See, if every soldier had to decide whether it was a just war, even just wars wouldn't be probably fought very well.
Well, so does that mean you shouldn't, per se, go into the service then?
Oh, no, I think you're insane if you go into the military. Yeah. Unless you're guaranteed to be a radio operator in Montana for the rest of your career, or something like that,
So then you shouldn't, nowadays, you shouldn't strive to have your son be going into the service?
Oh, no, for a number of reasons. You see, the military has been taken over by the feminists, and the people sympathetic to the feminists, namely guys who are kind of like feminists themselves. And it's not the military it used to be. They're not free to do things. The military did things in a particular way and always has done them because it's taken for granted that generals don't have to be overly sensitive to their soldiers, right? But now it's all, the feminists have taken over everything. You have to be sensitive, you have to mix genders and persuasions in every unit and do all this kind of stuff.
Freemasonry is really bold in the military too. It's very common.
How so? You mean members of the military joining the Freemasons? Kind of?
Right. Yeah, and they have lodges on base, and they do a lot of public displays and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just seen as a social network. So.
Well, it is a network, all right. Yeah. But look what else is allowed. Your tax dollars are now paying for witch doctors, witch doctor chaplains, witches and warlocks who are satanic chaplains, in quote.
Yeah, in the basic training there, you could, on Sundays, you could go to a religious service, and they have Wicca and stuff.
Yeah, and Wicca, for those people who don't know, is witchcraft. So you go to your local witch or warlock, and on Sunday though, right? They can't just pick some other day. That's right, yeah, they read Harry Potter. That's the first reading and the second reading are both Harry Potter, just different books. So, and legitimate self-defense. You see, here's where we're getting, it's kind of hard. No doubt it's hard being a policeman and things like that in many places. We're hearing about a lot of cases where policemen are, shooting people that, shouldn't be shot, essentially. But I think it's partly a fault of the training. Like, we hear about cases on the news where policemen shoot people who are running away. Well, if they're running away, then I'd let them run away, okay, unless they're an escaped criminal or something like that. You have to ask yourself that before you shoot somebody first of all, are they threatening my life? And if they are, of course, you shoot them. There's no question about self-defense. Otherwise, though, like somebody stole somebody's purse and then the policeman shot him dead. Well, since when is stealing a purse a capital crime? You see, is what they're being shot for actually what would get the death penalty when they weren't threatening somebody? So that's part of the problem, I think. But in any case. So, the fifth commandment forbids willful murder, which is one of the sins crying to heaven for vengeance, because it usurps God's right over life, destroys one whom God has made into his own image and likeness, robs him of his most precious possession, and sends a soul into eternity unprepared. That might be the worst part of it. When people live out their natural life and God takes them when he will, then his graces work on them, and they very often come to a kind of repentance before they die. If they're murdered in cold blood before that God's graces have had the chance to bring them back to confession or the church, then you've done an even greater injustice than just taking their life from. So what else? We have abortion, which is willful murder that cries to heaven for vengeance. Now we're having this increasing problem with euthanasia, right? I remember this talk way back. I used to go to a lot of these pro-life things when I was a teenager, and there was this guy named Father Marks. He's died since, but he was really a big figure in the pro-life thing. And he had a talk about, now it's baby doe, later it will be granny doe. And everybody was going, oh, ha, 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 ha. But now look at the states where you say you're suffering and the doctor gives you an overdose that you can take of whatever. And that is, I know pain is not pleasant, but avoiding pain isn't your biggest problem in life. There are diseases that are painful, but God is allowing that pain more than likely to bring that person to contrition, or to, have them think about the afterlife or do something like that. So to have someone kill themselves just because they can't stand, they've been diagnosed with cancer and they don't want to go through the pain that's coming up, that's completely artificial, and of course it's evil. All suicide is evil. And I don't know, it's making its way through the process here. We're going to have to be dealing with that. I read some good articles on this. In countries like the Netherlands and France that have this kind of suicide, you can, you ask your doctor and he gives you this big bottle of pills. You mix it with water and drink it, and then you're gone. There are no, it's evil in any way you do it, but there's no safeguards. For example, it doesn't have to be the patient themselves that asks for the deadly dose. It can be one of the relatives. So then you get relatives who stand to inherit a lot of money and give Granny the mortal milkshake. I mean, there are no safeguards against that kind of thing. There are, no evaluations as to whether the person's in their right mind or not. And a lot of things like that. So it gets completely out of control. It becomes like when abortion was introduced into this country, it was all about, exceptional cases to save the life of the mother and this kind of thing. You have to remember, exception always becomes the rule. That's the rule. The rule is that exception always becomes the rule. So it started out that way, and then pretty soon every mother's life was being threatened because she had this thing growing in her which was threatening her. So then it became abortion on demand. And now it's going to be, suicide on demand pretty soon. I mean, it is in Oregon, it is in other states, and it's being passed little by little here. So we have to be very careful of that. And once again, about making a will, you're going to have to protect yourselves from this kind of thing. You have to put it into your will that no one can do this to you. Or, it's effectively already being practiced in about every hospital anyway. They give, they were in pain, we gave them morphine. So, how much morphine are there? Oh, they're 1 milligram. You go back, now they're on 5. Oh, no, it's 10. And, it's like, they were in so much pain, we gave them 15 milligrams of morphine, and then they just, stopped. I don't know what happened, and it's just died peacefully. Well, we've had nurses actually in our parish quit because they knew that they were being ordered to routinely to administer lethal doses of morphine. And I've experienced, firsthand in people that I was bringing the sacraments to. So it's a very real thing, and you need to put in your directives there that, this can happen and that can't happen, because when you go in there, you become subject to somebody else. The families didn't ask for these old people to be given an overdose. It was the doctors and the staff decided, well, we need that bed. We have a more profitable use for that bed now in this hospital, so I'm sorry, Granny has to go, or whatever. And you think, some of you may be tempted to think I'm exaggerating. If anything, I'm understating what it's really like. So, abortion, which is willful murder committed before child's birth, often disguised as termination of pregnancy, it deprives the child of heaven forever. It is punished by the church with excommunication. Speaking of excommunication, back to Freemason. So, until 1983, 82, 83, when the new code of canon law came out, membership in the Freemasons and secret societies carried with it an automatic excommunication. If you were a Freemason, you were excommunicated, period, just by the law itself. No one had to catch you and say you're excommunicated. When you joined the Freemasons, you brought your own excommunication automatically on yourself. This is this kind of excommunication where you cross this line and you get the excommunication, no matter, automatically is called a late sententia. Excommunication. The kind where the Pope decides to excommunicate you publicly is called the ferende sententia. So anyway, these late sententia excommunications were attached to being a Freemason and belonging to a secret society.
How do you, let's say you said you want to go back to the faith?
Huh?
Let's say you want to go back to the faith.
Well, you have to go. Okay, that's a good question. She was asking, suppose you repent and you want to come back to the faith after you've been excommunicated. Well, in every diocese, even in this country, they're supposed to have a priest who is the penitentiary, whose job it is, on behalf of the bishop, to reconcile people who were outside of the church back to the church. So what you would technically have to do in most of these cases then, such as in the old days, you became a Freemason, you repented, they would send you to the priest who was the penitentiary of the diocese. Sometimes it was reserved to the bishop, but usually the bishop gave it to the penitentiary. And he would impose a special penance on you and then give you absolution and receive you back into the church. Sometimes you would have to do a profession of faith or something like that. In some cases, nowadays, in the 1983 code, you are no longer automatically excommunicated for being a Freemason. It just says you're not supposed to be one. And if you are one, then the bishop is supposed to punish you somehow. Well, odds are that the bishop's a Freemason. So he's going to punish you by inviting you to Club 33 at Disneyland, okay? And having a nice evening there. So that ain't going to happen. And so there's no real solid thing to deter you from being a Freemason anymore, except this prohibition. You're not supposed to be one. And so what we have is a lot of Catholics, so-called, who become Freemasons. It's very popular, for example, with the Filipinos. Filipinos are way into being Freemasons, for example, the men. It's just, there's lodges all over the Philippines. So the rest, on Sundays they're Catholic, and the rest of the week they're Freemasons doing their thing. In Italy, Freemasons run everything. They have their own branch of Freemasonry in Italy, and they run everything all over the place. And this was even before the infiltration of the church. France, it goes without saying.
In Italy, you have to be registered,
Yeah, in Italy, officially, if you're a Freemason, you have to register with the state, and they publish the information, but they give you a code name. So they don't give you a real name.
Buono.
Yeah, huh? I know. And some of the code names are very easy to figure out and happen to be popes,
But it's still a mortal sin, right?
It's still a mortal sin, absolutely, because you're joining an organization that is conspiring against the church, against God, basically. I think it was Leo XIII basically put it, his Freemasons are the enemies of God, period.
So that club at Disneyland, that's a Masonic club?
Huh?
Club 33?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
In order to be a member, you have to be a Mason. You can go there, they can have guests and invite people who aren't Freemasons, but in order to be a member, pay for membership, you have to be a Freemason. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's where he started Club 33. Okay, so now abortion, it is punished by the church with excommunication. Now, and it was in the past that if you murdered somebody, there were a number of things you were forbidden to do, or you got automatic excommunications. Murder, including abortion, dueling, believe it or not, was one of them. There were a lot of things. In 1983, so they redid the Code of Canon Law, and they kind of made it sort of a joke. It's nothing short of a joke. So in the new Code of Canon Law, 1983, you will be excommunicated if you get an abortion or you help somebody get an abortion. Okay, so the doctors and nurses who work at the abortuary, the person who drives the person to the abortion clinic, who knows they're going for an abortion, all of those people technically can incur an excommunication. But how did the 83 Code mess it up? They have to have known they would be excommunicated for doing it. So if you're just some, as ignorant as a blowfly, and I go get an abortion, then you're not excommunicated. It's just a mortal sin, so it's like you're excommunicated from God, but not from the church. If a priest says, don't go get an abortion because you'll be excommunicated, and you go, oh really, I'm going to get one anyway, then you're excommunicated. So what has to happen now then, according to the code, abortion is a sin, an excommunication and a sin reserved to the bishop, meaning a bishop may reserve it to himself to be the only one in his diocese that absolves from that sin or that excommunication. Effectively, in every diocese that I know of, the bishop has given the faculty to all the priests in the diocese, except in some. Like I think in Mobile, Alabama, it was reserved still to the bishop, who had a penitentiary and things like that. But essentially, the bishop can give it to the priest, and most priests have the faculty. But in any case, so if a person gets the abortion and either gets the excommunication or not, in order to be received back into the church, they would have to technically go through the channels as well. But in the case of the excommunication, only if they knew it was an excommunication. Whereas before, it's you got it, sorry. You didn't know, ignorance is no excuse.
So if that person, let's say they wanted to be brought back into the church, but then they died, is that the same as like if you were on your way to confession and you, well, I'm sure about it. Yeah.
Well, they're dying, and hopefully they say an act of contrition, and then they have to hope that God thought their contrition was as perfect as they thought it was. Because if that happens, perfect contrition can still save them if they have perfect contrition, which is, really detesting their sin because they've offended God, who is love. Okay, if they did achieve that state, then they would be forgiven even if they died before going to confession. And abortion. Many more things today than people think it is. For example, certain forms of so-called birth control do not prevent conception, they cause abortion of the little baby who's been conceived. Like I was confused now, IEDs with IUDs, but it's, an IED will definitely end pregnancy all over the place. But an IUD is a device that causes the little baby to be rejected, for example. The so-called morning after pill, RU486, is an abortion causer. It's not a pregnancy preventer. So a number of these things, the person never went so far in several of these cases so as to develop the visible signs of pregnancy, because they went the morning after and got this pill and murdered their baby kind of neatly. You see, they just took the pill. But all these things are first-degree murder. They're first-degree murder. And so obviously something else crazy about our country. It makes me so sick to hear the arch hypocrite in the White House talking about, we have to do it for the children. We have to save these children's lives from these crazy people with guns. Well, you're not saving the children's lives from crazy people with like vacuum cleaners, The millions upon millions are being exterminated, and the president is funding the murderers more, Planned Parenthood, giving them more money to do it, and then trying to take the guns away because somebody killed a kid. It doesn't make any sense. Madness. Diabolical disorientation. Suicide is willful self-murder. Okay, that's very important, because in many cases of suicide, a person is not in their right mind. It's very seldom, I think, that somebody is fully sane and in possession of their faculties that'll kill themselves. Generally, it's depression, some other mental illness, something like that, some extreme circumstances. So suicide then becomes a sin against the fifth commandment, mortal sin, when somebody's in their total right mind and decides to take their own life. And this does happen. I just think most of it, from what I've experienced, is because of mental illness or depression or something like that. And as I've talked to people who have attempted, we've had people who have attempted suicide and things like that, and thank God didn't succeed. One of them, I don't know why, called me. And I called 911, I got them over to their house and everything like that. It's like, why would you start committing suicide and then call your pastor? It's like, but by the grace of God they did, and they're still alive today. And they were telling me that the depression is such a pain that they weren't thinking of killing themselves, they were thinking of getting away from this pain. So it puts a whole new light on the thing, We tend to think of, it's kind of a cowardly way out, you just gotta buck up and, this kind of thing. But there are mental conditions where it doesn't look that way to them. That things have become so painful, they just want to get away from the pain. And if that means, ending their life, they think that what's on the other side for them is much better than what it is they're undergoing here. So it's important to remember that. Because somebody under those extreme circumstances who ends their life, it's not willful self-murder in most cases. There are cases, though, of willful self-murder. You've heard the story before of one of my grandfather's neighbors who thought he had been diagnosed with cancer, and in totally his right mind, just simply said, I've known other people with cancer, and it's much better that I just kill myself now than go through all the chemo and radiation and nonsense and die. Anyway, so he went and hanged himself, only to have a message on his answering machine that the doctor gave him the wrong report. Yeah, so.
Monsignor, if you're diagnosed with cancer, a really bad cancer, and you decide not to do anything about it, is that?
Well, no, like the way you're putting it, no, there's nothing wrong with that. A really bad cancer where you're just going to go through all this nonsense and die anyway, which is what they do. But there are certain treatments, that you can be diagnosed with the cancer where there's a really good cure rate on the thing. Well, then you should, if the chances are good, I think you're better, morally speaking, doing the cure. But if it's one of these things where they say, I'm sorry, you have stage 10 cancer, you're a tumor with arms and legs at this point, and you just decide not to do anything, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, God allowed you to have that disease, the consequence of original sin, and you're going to go use your time you have left to prepare yourself to go see him, which is fine. I mean, we've had a lot of people that way. I remember I went to see Bruce O'Dew until he died, and that's what he was doing. When he told me about his cancer, I said, well, Bruce, he said, they figure I have like 6 months to live. I said, well, you have 6 months to become a saint. So that's kind of we should be thinking that way all the time, but especially if you get one of these diagnoses of something terminal. Huh? Jewish? No. Not that I know of. Oh, Reed. Yeah, he was from Northridge.
That's also cancer, was that?
No, he had a heart attack or something. Yeah, no, it was sudden. It wasn't he wasn't in good health, but he didn't have cancer. And so in many of these diseases, you can see God's mercy. Like cancer, in a way, is merciful. You have to die from something. The Irish are very optimistic, and sure, you have to die from something, which is true. And something like cancer, you do have time to pray and get your life in order, go to your confession. Even AIDS, AIDS doesn't kill you overnight either. And I remember a friend of mine was, part of his parish was an AIDS hospice in San Francisco. And he said there were very few that didn't make a good death after, they would turn to religion, turn to him, good confessions, sacraments and everything, and then, So there's God's mercy even in terrible diseases. So suicide is willful self-murder. a crime against God, against society, against one's family, and against oneself. And that's so when you do it with full advertence of the will. Exposing one's life or health to unnecessary danger without sufficient cause. Remember I talked about that before, but doing a risky activity unnecessarily, such as for thrill seeking, especially when you have a responsibility to your family. So, okay, if you're a paratrooper in the military, then your job is to jump out of airplanes, and supposedly they show you how to do it, right? Or, because, you go through your whole little course or whatever. But a father of a family who works in a grocery store or something, or, and decides that for his 50th or 40th birthday or something, midlife crisis birthday, wants to go jump out of an airplane with a parachute, that is pretty close to a mortal sin.
What about if you have no response? What if you're just single?
Well, I mean, that is too. Why endanger your life just because you want the thrill of jumping out of an airplane? It doesn't make any sense. Yes, it's fairly safe statistically, but still the 1 in 1,000 whose chute doesn't open could be you, and there's no reason for you to do it. There's no proportional cause. A paratrooper has proportional cause. A thrill seeker has no proportional cause. A thrill is not a recognized benefit to weigh against endangering your life. See? And there's lots of professions that are dangerous because of the profession. Well, then that's part of the profession. But to go seeking something, with no balancing reason is wrong when it endangers your life. See? So exposing one's life or health to unnecessary. It was ruled by the church a long time ago that, for example, in times of plague and whatnot, that a priest was not under the moral obligation to go in and anoint somebody who had one of these horrible diseases that they could get. Most of the time the priest went and did it anyway, but the church pronounced that you were not obliged to go in and actually anoint them. You can absolve them from a distance and things like that. Let's see about that. Yeah, I mean, that happens to us. Sometimes I'll go to the hospitals, right? And some person will have something or other, and they want me to put on this disposable cotton, suit. I look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man going in. Like out of Ghostbusters. But the thing is, you can't anoint with gloves on anyway, and so I just figure, well, God help me, but I'm going to anoint this person anyway. I take the glove off and do it, and then just, stop by one of the stations with alcohol stuff. And in New Orleans, though, during the flu epidemic, remember the Spanish flu epidemic that literally killed like 10% of the people in this country at the time. The priests and nuns actually took care of all the flu victims, and the state recognized that from then on they got free fare for the streetcars and buses inside the city. And then in 1988 they revoked it because it wasn't egalitarian. See, the rabbis and Zen masters who did nothing for the people except run from them in case of the flu weren't getting the same treatment, so why should these Catholics get the special treatment? So they did over that. Now we're doing here. Fighting. Was that basketball guy that just broke his hand? I don't remember his name. I don't know these people. Anyway, it's so dumb. It's like, so he hit somebody and broke his hand. Why do you have to make that? It's because the feminists are running everything now that it even makes the news. Let me tell the women that guys fighting, that just happens, all right? And you get over it and you apologize, to each other eventually, and then that's the end of that, right? But no, it's been all over the news. What sanctions should this guy have? Of course, the usual feminists are on there. What a terrible example. They've got to revoke his right to his movable action figures and all. And the news, typically, instead of saying, okay, this guy's had a fight and he busted his hand, too bad for him, right? And that would have been the end of the story. There's not much of a story then when you do that. But fighting, some people are more what we'd say pugilistic than others. And they go looking for fights, or else they, there are different people when they drink alcohol react differently, So I've had friends, of all persuasions. Anyway, there's this one guy, and if you gave him scotch, he'd want to beat anything. He would just start just picking fights with everything. So you just kept him away from scotch. Canadian whiskey was fine. It wouldn't do that to him. But let me tell you, so if somebody knows that about themselves then, for whatever quirk of body chemistry that's due to, then to go seeking after that, knowing you're going to get into a fight, which, and he just lost it when he got into fights. I mean, he had to have most of his face replaced with plastic at one point because it pounded him and whatnot. Then that would be a sin, courting that kind of thing purposely or picking a fight. But some, guys, it's just some kids get carried away. That's probably what this basketball guy did. Quarreling, which tends towards fighting and even murder. Injurious words, which lead to quarrels and their consequences. Whoever shall say thou fool shall be in danger of hellfire. And scandal, which is something that leads people into sin. So this is one, I got to end here, but this is a reason that parents, likewise, in the upbringing of their children, have to be very careful of the kind of, fighting. Fighting between mom and dad will inevitably happen. There's no family that doesn't have it. But they got to make sure that they minimize it, try to keep it away from the kids, whatever, and it doesn't become a source of scandal, which makes the kids think that fighting is the routine, right? Okay. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Our Lady, seat of wisdom. Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. So, Ash Wednesday, which isn't for another couple weeks, but I just want you to know, when Ash Wednesday does roll around, we won't have class. Our penance will be giving up this class for the day.